Tonight on Bridge City News, a manhunt is on for two Canadian teenagers who are the prime suspects in 3 murders. Hundreds of union members and supporters showed up at the provincial building in Lethbridge today protesting Bill 9. And naloxone. Jeanette Roche introduces us to a serum that saves the lives of those who overdose on drugs.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. A large crowd gathered today outside of the provincial building in Lethbridge to show support of union workers and to protest the wage arbitration delay known as Bill 9. Jeanette Roche has the details.
Sign, everywhere a sign. And where there wasn't a sign, there was a song.
Mighty, mighty union! Mighty, mighty union!
All this chanting and marching was part of the scene outside the provincial building during the noon hour. Nurses, child services workers, and other provincial government employees gathered to protest Bill 9, which was put into place to delay the wage bargaining of provincial union workers' contracts.
You know, the government just can't break contracts whenever they feel like it, because if they're going to do it to us, they're certainly going to do it to somebody else.
Susan Slade is the vice president of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, which oversaw the information picket. She says it's their members who are affected most by the passing of the bill.
So the original contract was signed, I believe, back in December, and it contained 2 years of zeros. So for 17-18 was zeros, and then the 2019 contained a wage reopener. So the NDP was who signed this contract, and then when the UCP took over in June, they brought down this legislation that basically broke the contract.
We're told close to 300 people came out to protest Bill 9 today in front of the provincial building. Many of them members of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, but many of them just out to support those members.
I'm here in support of the union. I unfortunately couldn't work in my life, but I agree that Kenny's taking the rights away to bargaining. Not only this union, but the teachers and others like them. We need to be able to bargain.
The government is breaking the law by doing this and disrespecting workers right across this province because it's affecting public service workers, but that in turn will roll back and there will be a negative spiral and it will affect every worker in this province.
Workers and their supporters hope this will send a loud message to the UCP government.
They should be in arbitration now, not delaying it until after the federal election.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
The search for 2 teen suspects in the deaths of 3 people in northern British Columbia has stretched into northern Manitoba. RCMP in that province believe 19-year-old Cam McLeod and 18-year-old Briar Schmigelski were recently spotted in the Gillam area. Fox Lake Cree Nation, which is near Gillam, said in a statement that residents should report any suspicious activity to police. Gillam is about 1,000 kilometers north of Winnipeg, with only one major road in and out. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says reinforcements are on the way to help with increased caseloads being faced by prosecutors in our province. In 2016, the Supreme Court imposed time limits on how long a criminal trial can take before it is deemed unreasonably delayed. The ruling said people charged with an offense have the right to have their case tried within 18 months in provincial courts and 30 months in superior courts. The result has been more cases being stayed by the Crown. Premier Kenney said the possibility of criminals getting off scot-free is not acceptable, and the government will be announcing plans to hire 50 more prosecutors. We've been hearing so much in the news lately about naloxone, the drug that counteracts the effects of an opioid overdose to bring the patient back to life. But how does it actually work? And how do you use it? BCN's Jeanette Roche went to Arches to find out the secret and misconceptions behind this magic little serum.
Thousands of people are alive today because of this little black kit. But it's what's inside the kit, this magic little serum called naloxone, that's the real lifesaver. Stephanie Spurrier is the take-home naloxone worker at Arches. Her job is to train people on how to use the kit, how naloxone works, and overdose prevention techniques.
Naloxone itself, it's an opioid receptor antagonist, which is a super fancy way for saying it blocks the opioid receptors that we have.
In other words, the naloxone kicks the opioid off the receptor so nothing can get in except naloxone. The problem is it only works on opioids. So if someone is having an overdose from any other type of drug or even alcohol poisoning, it won't work.
I still recommend, though, if you're not sure what the person may have taken and you suspect it's a drug overdose, go ahead and administer this anyway, because it is a very, very safe drug to use. It's not going to make the situation any worse.
According to Spurrier, the drug is safe enough to use on pregnant women, diabetics, and even children.
So the way this works, in this kit, we have 3 vials of naloxone, and then we have 1 Vantage Point syringe per vial, so it's a one-time use syringe only.
A big misconception about naloxone is that it's not a permanent solution. Its effects only last about 30 to 60 minutes, meaning that any opioid left in the person's system could take over again. So a second or even third dose of naloxone may need to be administered,
just because there is a potential for a second overdose to occur.
That's why it's really important to get the person to a doctor immediately.
Tomorrow, Jeanette will talk to experts about the best ways of administering naloxone. Another drug dealer is off the streets in Medicine Hat. Alert's Medicine Hat crime team wrapped up a 4-month investigation with the arrest of 54-year-old Teresa Babitsky. Police also confiscated $42,000 worth of cash and drugs. That includes methamphetamines, fentanyl, cocaine, and just over $5,600 in cash. Babitsky faces various drug-related charges, including possession and drug trafficking. She's back in court tomorrow. There's some new technology to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. Alarming stats show that Lethbridge holds the unenviable top ranking in the Stats Canada 2018 Crime Index. There's an app for your smartphone that can potentially save your life.
This app may be the most advanced of all, called Lifeline Response. Not only tracking you, but even calling the police instantly. So you put your thumb on there. Once you let go, you have 20 seconds to put in your disarm pin. If you don't, the alarm goes off. There you go. Then you gotta call.
This is Emma with Lifeline Response.
This app can be used by anybody who is walking alone and does not feel safe. More information can be found on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The University of Lethbridge received a boost in research money to the tune of $1.8 million. It is thanks to a series of discovery grants provided by the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. Dr. Boris Demeler, an expert in biochemistry, was awarded a $50,000 grant. He says the money will cover many small costs that otherwise do not get funded.
It really helps to train the next generation of qualified personnel here at this university to help them find a good career in the future. And so that's what this money basically goes for. And then, of course, it funds the research that we're trying to do, which is investigation of macromolecular interactions, that are molecules that control the processes of life. And we're basically trying to figure out how they work together and what the networks are and how strongly they bind to each other, and that helps us to figure out how diseases work and how we might cure diseases.
Demeler is a professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Structural Biology at the University of Texas Health Science Center. He is at the U of L on a 7-year, $350,000 per year contract as part of the Canada 150 Research Chairs Program. Economic Development Lethbridge received a funding boost of $1.68 million over the next 3 years.
STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, which are careers and company types that are underrepresented by women typically in those sectors. We're looking to use this funding to enhance the ability of women to engage in those STEM-related careers and companies, and we'll be providing workshops and training to do that.
Barlow, who will oversee the Women in STEM, remarked on the opportunity to reach a diverse group of women with the funding. It's the time of year again. The Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce is looking for 2019's top 40 under 40 of the city's biggest and brightest. Now, these are 40 people in your community being recognized for their outstanding efforts and achievements.
We are looking for those exciting individuals, for those top 40 under 40, the business professionals, those that are in corporate, not-for-profit, those that are involved in sports, those that are great coaches, great leaders, doing neat, innovative things. We want to show the diversity of our region and just show the exciting stuff that's really happening in our city, whether it's at the university, at the college, at the industrial side of town, downtown. There's a lot happening.
For more information on how you can nominate a candidate for the Chamber's Top 40 Under 40, visit the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce website. The United Way has selected 18 new partners for the rest of the year and next. The names of these organizations will officially be announced on Tuesday at City Hall. Executive Director of the United Way for Southwestern Alberta, Janelle Marietta Vasquez, spoke about the types of programs that are attractive to the United Way.
So our mandate really focuses on poverty reduction, healthy families, strong communities. We're looking at inclusive communities, building strong connections, making sure that we're focusing on getting people out of isolation. And then we also focus in child and youth development, so programs that really support our youth in growing and doing the best that they can in their lives. This year there's been a huge focus on Indigenous programming, so ensuring that we're staying true to the traditions that are needed and that the right people are running those programs. So that's been really important when we look into our summer literacy programs to keep kids focused and ready to go and being school ready come September. We're also looking at great opportunities with cooking classes to really teach families who might be working on a really tight budget how to make sure that they're getting the nutrition that they need.
Vasquez says 1 in 5 people will be funded by a United Way program in their lifetime. Alberta has been the prairie province which has been the hardest hit by tornadoes this year. Now that's according to the good folks with Environment Canada. They say the biggest reasons are because of the wet weather and thunderstorm activity. So far, there have been 17 probable or confirmed tornadoes in Alberta this year, passing our province's 30-year average of 12, with many weeks left in the twister season. Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, they have seen 13 tornadoes, and Manitoba only 4. A spokesperson with Environment Canada says the highest number of tornadoes in Alberta in the last 35 years was 26 back in 1988. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer stopped by an agricultural fair in Quebec where he fielded a question about the new Canada Food Guide.
I think the reaction from the Liberals was very exaggerated. I promised a review of the food guide, of the process that went into it, to ensure that all the science was included. We twice asked for a study at the Health Committee to ensure that that the process was done properly. The Liberals shut that down twice, so I don't know why they were afraid of some transparency on that. But it's the overreaction on the Liberals to have a review of the food guide was, I think, is very telling, trying to politicize that. We support the science. We just want to make sure that all the science is included.
The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is calling on members to lobby all of the federal parties in an effort to influence political platforms heading into the October election. National Chief Perry Bellegarde says he was able to influence party platforms in 2015 and will do so again for this election.
I want to say now the importance of voting, the importance of influencing all party platforms, no question. And once we see what each party has in terms of Indigenous or First Nations priorities, make an informed choice. When we look back to 2015, there was a fire lit across Canada. 61.5% of eligible voters, First Nations voters, voted. In some instances, they ran out of ballots on reservations because so many voters turned out to vote. And so now the message is that First Nations priorities are Canada's priorities. First Nations issues are Canada's issues. And if you want to become Prime Minister or a member of Parliament, you better listen to our people and our issues concerns, because we vote now and we are important and we have impact. That's what's going to happen in October. We're not going to be pushed to the side anymore.
Bellegarde was re-elected as National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations last July. In his long-awaited testimony before the U.S. Congress, former Special Counsel Robert Mueller says Russia's efforts to interfere in U.S. elections is among the most serious challenges to American democracy.
As you know, I made a few limited remarks about our report when we closed the Special Counsel's office in May of this year. But there are certain points that bear emphasis. First, our investigation found that the Russian government interfered in our election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Second, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired with the Russian government in its election interference activities. We did not address collusion, which is not a legal term, Rather, we focused on whether the evidence was sufficient to charge any member of the campaign with taking part in a criminal conspiracy, and it was not.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Boris Johnson will be great as Britain's next prime minister. His comments came during a speech to teenagers in Washington.
We're respected all over the world. We have a really good man is going to be the Prime Minister of the UK now, Boris Johnson. Good man. He's tough and he's smart. They're saying Britain Trump. They call him Britain Trump, and people are saying that's a good thing. That they like me over there. That's what they wanted. That's what they need. That's what they need. He'll get it done. Boris is good. He's going to do a good job.
Hundreds of firefighters are working to help keep a wildfire away from homes in northern Arizona. Officials estimate the fire has torched about 5 square kilometers in a mountain pass within minutes of the city of Flagstaff.
We do have a full aerial asset today, meaning as of this morning we have air tankers and helicopters to help keep this in check until we get all these pieces in place.
More than a year and over 170,000 doses of a new vaccine have done little to stop the spread of Ebola in Congo. As we hear in this next report, health workers say many people fear the vaccine was trying to kill them, while others cling to the ways of traditional healing.
Doctors say the Ebola virus killed Musa and Asiya Katembo. But superstition and distrust were just as much to blame.
On a réalisé 2 semaines en train de les négocier d'aller au CTE vite. Mais le mari, comme lui, il aime trop de féticheurs, il est allé chercher quelques féticheurs pour entrer dans sa maison.
By the time the couple agreed to go to a clinic, it was too late. Such is the battle against this ever-evolving disease. Officials in Congo now have an Ebola vaccine with a 97.5% effectiveness rate. It can even improve the odds of survival in those already infected. Yet after a year and some 171,000 doses administered, the epidemic shows few signs of waning. Health workers say widely believed myths are keeping people from being treated.
Ils ont beaucoup analysé les vaccins selon leur manière et croyaient que quand vous serez vacciné, il vous serait difficile de mettre au monde. Et deuxièmement, le vaccin va les tuer. Et deuxièmement, le vaccin a été conçu pour exterminer cette communauté.
This latest outbreak has killed more than 1,700 people. Just last week, the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency after a case was confirmed in Goma, the region's largest city. In the past, health workers focused on vaccinating those who were in close contact with a sick person, but locating those people has been challenging.
The movement of people is very high between different areas here, and between also the province with other countries around.
Officials are trying a new strategy that involves pop-up clinics in the neighborhoods most affected and giving the vaccine to all who are willing. Endemic violence in the region has prevented outside health teams from reaching many areas. The use of locally trained workers has helped. This woman recently came in to be vaccinated. The Katembos were her neighbors. The dead couple's 2-month-old daughter, Lachia, has tested negative for the virus. But she must be at least 6 months old before she can be vaccinated. Alan Breed, Associated Press.
Such tragedy in Congo. We had a slightly cooler day today in the Windy City, and the temperature is going up, however. Complete weather details are on deck. The temperature dropped slightly in the Windy City today. Tonight, mainly clear, with a low expected near 13. Mainly sunny tomorrow with a high expected near 28. Even warmer on Friday, as we should get up to 30 degrees. A beautiful weekend is shaping up. A clear sky on Saturday with a high near 28, sunny and a hot 27 for Sunday. Monday, we should get up to 28, and Tuesday, a couple of degrees cooler at 26. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2007 at 34 degrees. and the record low was 4 in 1968. Sunrise was at 5:51, sunset at 9:25. The days are getting shorter. Let's see how it's looking across the country for tomorrow now. Expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 23 in Victoria, mainly sunny, and 24 for Vancouver. Lots of sunshine and 25 in Calgary tomorrow. Edmonton was under severe thunderstorm watch today. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy with a high expected near 22. Regina also received some rain today. Tomorrow it should be mainly sunny and 25. Expect rain and 20 degrees in Saskatoon. A slight chance of thunder showers at 29 for Winnipeg on Thursday. Pretty much the same picture with lots of humidity in Toronto tomorrow. A slight chance of showers and 29 as well for Ottawa. Mainly cloudy and 28 degrees for Montreal. Expect a few clouds at 26 in Fredericton tomorrow. Increasing clouds at 22 for Halifax. Charlottetown will have a mixture of sun and cloud and should get up to 23. In St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of rain and a high near 14 degrees tomorrow. Federal regulators in the United States are fining Facebook $5 billion for privacy violations. The government also instituted new oversight and restrictions on its business practices. They are only holding CEO Mark Zuckerberg personally responsible in a limited fashion. The fine is the largest the U.S. Federal Trade Commission has levied on a tech company. Zuckerberg must personally certify Facebook's compliance with its privacy programs, and any false certifications could expose him to civil or criminal penalties. There has been a worldwide recall on a breast implant which has been linked to a rare form of cancer. Medical device maker Allergan is recalling its biocell textured breast implants following updated information from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The FDA found the implants account for a high number of rare lymphoma cases. Allergan also announced a recall in Canada after our government announced it suspended the licenses for the implants due to potential risks from cancer. Canadian National Railway had its highest ever quarterly revenue and adjusted earnings share thanks to a sharp increase in crude by rail traffic and container traffic. Canada's largest railway operator says net income rose 4% year over year to $1.36 billion for the quarter ending June 30th. On an annual adjusted basis, diluted earnings per share climbed 15% to $1.73, which is a record for CN Railway for the second quarter. Analysts had been expecting earnings of $1.65. Loblaw's second quarter adjusted earnings and revenue fell in line with analysts' expectations. The grocery and pharmacy company says it had $286 million in net earnings. Now that's an increase of 2.9% from a year earlier. Adjusted diluted net earnings came in at just over $1 a share, up from 93 cents from last year. According to the data firm Refinitiv, analysts expected $1.01 per share and revenue of $11.15 billion. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, hundreds of AUPU union members and supporters protested at the provincial building in Lethbridge earlier today. They were protesting the government's handling of Bill 9. Union leaders see it as the beginning of a process that will lead to legislated wage rollbacks later this fall. It appears as though the federal government will not be replacing our 37-year-old CF-18 fighter jets for quite some time. Brian Lilly will explain next when our military can look forward to seeing new aircraft. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out and support a worthy cause. The Ogun School Nigeria fundraiser is an international dinner, art show, and auction taking place Friday, July 26th at 6 p.m. at the Southminster Church Hall. Enjoy a delicious dinner with an exciting auction plus live entertainment. Tickets are $10 per person. Reserve your seat by emailing folasobayaju@gmail.com or text 867-688 0066. Come out to Galt Gardens and enjoy Shakespeare in the Park 2019 every Thursday and Friday from now until August 9th. The Lethbridge Shakespeare Performance Society presents the action-packed and exciting play Macbeth. Suitable for all ages, shows are free with an opportunity to donate. Experience the timeless magic of one of Shakespeare's best-known plays. For more information, call Kate at 403-329-4568. The 22nd annual Joel Nicholas Arnoldson Memorial Charity Golf Tournament is taking place Friday, August 16th at Paradise Canyon Golf Resort. Green fees are $190 per person, with proceeds going toward the Green Acres Foundation, which provides quality and affordable housing for seniors. For more information and to register, call 403-328-1155. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There are so many different hashtags that are trending on social media, including Trudeau must go, Butts must go, and sheer insanity. Is this thanks to concerned Canadians leading up to the federal election, October 21st, or is it thanks to bots? Joining me now to discuss this is one of our political reporters, Brian Lilly, joins me from Toronto. Brian, are they hashtags thanks to bots, concerned voters, or both? Also, maybe explain to our viewers what exactly a bot is.
A bot, it's an automatic Twitter account that tweets out normally at beyond human rates. You know, people that are tweeting hundreds of times a day. Is that really a person back there behind that strange account that just started following you and is retweeting everything or attacking everything you say? Look, there's been stories in the media about how the conservative, the Trudeau must go hashtag, that was done by bots. And if you read some of the stories, you would think bots are just being used to support conservatives or to attack liberals. Let me tell you, as someone that's been on Twitter for more than a decade, they're used by all sides. And I am sure that there are fake accounts and bots being run by both parties, either officially or unofficially, both parties. Maybe the NDP and the Greens are into this, I don't know, but definitely the Liberals and the Conservatives. There are liberal Twitter accounts that attack everything I say. And they will be up in the middle of the night. They will be up all day long just attacking what I've tweeted out. There's no way that this is a real person. It's a fake account. Yeah, I'm sure that some of the Trudeau must go was driven by bots, but I'm sure that some of the blocked by Rempel, which was a popular hashtag this week, was driven by bots. And there's also the fact that, a lot of concern among conservatives that social media sites are biased. And that is something that's been out there for a long time, and that especially in the United States after the 2016 election was proven to be true, at least in the case of Facebook, to be sure, that they were out there promoting liberal or Democrat ideas and tamping down on Republican or conservative groups.
Brian, Butts is back. We talked about Butts must go. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's right-hand man and a focus of the SNC-Lavalin scandal. Jerry Butts is back. Is that a good or a bad thing?
It depends on which side of the fence you sit on, or it could be good and bad for both. If you're a Liberal supporter, you might be really happy that the guy that helped orchestrate the 2015 election win is back in the fold, the guy that was a steady hand on the rudder for Justin Trudeau's ship during the first several years of government, that he's back. You also might be concerned, if you're a Liberal, that this brings back up the SNC-Lavalin scandal. By the way, you want to flip that over? The Conservatives love that Butts is back because they get to bring up the SNC-Lavalin scandal again, which is what he resigned over. But as far as them being concerned, is this bad news for the Conservatives? It could be, because Jerry Butts knows what he's doing. So it's both good and bad for the two main parties, and it's bad for the NDP because they're still trying to gain traction somewhere, anywhere, please. So it's going to make it more interesting. Does the public still care about the SNC-Lavalin scandal? Some do, some don't. Some are going to walk by. But we did see during that, especially with the way that Justin Trudeau treated Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, that women started to tell pollsters, I'm not voting for this guy. And he was down in the polls among women for a long time. I don't think he's gotten all of that support back yet, by the way. And Jerry Butts was a part of that. So there's risk on both sides for all the parties involved.
Speaking of the polls, what's the latest? Where did the Tories stand, the Liberals, the NDP? And how about the Green Party with Elizabeth May and Warren Kinsella jumping on board the May ship? Are they doing a lot better now too?
It depends on which poll, and I'll tell you why. Because some pollsters prompt you. You know, when you're going through a poll, either a phone poll or online, you'll be prompted. Do you want to vote for the Liberal Party, the Conservatives, the NDP, or the Greens, or if you're in Quebec, the Bloc? And they rotate them so that it's not the first. You're not picking the first party every time, or to deal with those people that are always just hitting one. The parties are rotated through. Some pollsters do not prompt for the Greens. They will say Liberal, Conservative, NDP, or other. And then if you select other, then you're given a whole list of other parties: Greens, People's Party of Canada, the Maxime Bernier Party, and some other choices that you can make. On polls where the Greens are prompted, they do better. When they're not prompted, they're lower. And John Wright, who is with Dart Insight, he tells me that he does the other, followed by, you get your choices of other parties, because when he prompted for the Greens, they always did better than they did on ballot, on voting day. And when he did it the other way, then they would actually be similar to what they would get at the ballot box. So as far as the Conservatives and the Liberals, the Conservatives are ahead in Ipsos, in Angus Reid, in Dart. It depends on, are the Conservatives being heard a bit in Ontario by Doug Ford and the Ontario PC government? A bit. They're buoyed in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba. They're doing pretty well in Quebec. But the Liberals still hold a lead in Quebec. They hold a lead in Atlantic Canada, and they're competitive in British Columbia. So it's really going to be a series of regional races that decides this. It's not going to be a big national campaign.
And Brian, it seems hard to believe, but the federal Liberals are making the Canada Food Guide an election issue and are attacking Andrew Scheer's criticism of it.
Yeah, this is, trying to appeal to the people that the Liberals think voted for them to bring back the law-informed census in the last election. If you voted for the Liberals to bring back the law-informed census, you were bringing back the law-informed, or you were voting Liberal anyway in the last election. That was not a vote driver for swing voters, which is what all the parties are pitching to. The parties are not pitching, to a degree, they want to keep their base on side, but they're always pitching for those swing voters, those people that'll switch between the various groups or who maybe didn't vote before. The long-form census isn't going to be a driver for that. The Canada Food Guide is not going to be a driver for that. But I can't believe that the media spent, 6-7 days now since Andrew Scheer made his comments that all he said was he would review this because the dairy farmers are upset. Milk and dairy used to have its own category within the Canada Food Guide. It's no longer there. Milk and dairy products like cheese and butter are downplayed. And they say, well, wait a minute. This was done by people that have a bias against dairy. Find me 5 dietitians and I'll get you 10 opinions. It's like lawyers. Lawyers and dietitians, there's a lot of debate and dispute about this. So for the Liberals to come out and say, we're purely about science and we only make decisions based on science, I don't buy it. And if that were the case, by the way, they wouldn't have blocked Porter Airlines from expanding the Island Airport in Toronto. They wouldn't have blocked the Northern Gateway pipeline from going through with a tanker ban off the BC coast. They wouldn't have blocked Energy East by saying you've got to account for upstream and downstream emissions to be able to go through Quebec when a pipeline that Quebecers want doesn't have to do that. Don't tell me you're all about evidence when the record shows otherwise.
Brian, after a full 40 years after the Liberals took power, they've moved to replace the aging CF-18 fighter jets. Tell me more about that.
Aging CF-18 fighter jets. Let me tell you about this, Hal. These jets are coming up on their 37th birthday this October. 4 days after the election is the 37th anniversary of Canada getting its first delivery of the CF-18. The hit song on the Billboard charts back then was a brand new song from John Cougar. Not John Cougar Mellencamp, John Cougar, a little ditty about Jack and Diane. That was the new hit back then. A guy named Justin Trudeau, our current PM, he was 10 years old and his father Pierre was still Prime Minister. That's how long ago we got these things. So the Liberals promised in the last election they're going to scrap the Conservative plan to buy the F-35s. If they hadn't, we would have new fighter jets by now. Instead, they scrapped that. Then what they did was they said, we're going to buy some used Australian jets. They did that. Now they've announced they're going to have a new competition. So there's 4 companies allowed in: Saab out of Sweden, Airbus out of Britain and France, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin out of the United States. They have to have their proposals in by spring of 2020. And you think, okay, so we'll get a fighter jet just after that. No, they'll pick a winner in 2022, and then they'll take delivery sometime in 2025. So not after the next election, but after the election after that. So claiming that we're going to get new fighter jets is really disingenuous. It's going to be a long time before our fighter pilots see new jets. Already, these pilots are far younger than the jets we asked them to fly. And I think that is despicable. Look, the Conservatives should have done this when they were in power. They lost interest in the military because it's not enough of a vote getter. They were gung-ho at the beginning. They saw it was causing them headaches. They backed off a bit. The Liberals aren't committed to the military. But my view is, you ask the men and women in uniform to go into harm's way for you, then you equip them properly.
Brian, there has been a lot of questions about the escape of a meat cleaver killer from a mental health institution, and then he escaped to China.
Yeah, this is a guy named Shibing Kong. He's a 47-year-old. He arrived in Canada in 2010. He was a permanent resident. In 2014, he used a meat cleaver to kill his roommate, hacked him to death. It was brutal, brutal murder. But Kong suffers from schizophrenia. I'm not sure if he has other mental health issues, but he was found not criminally responsible. So he went into a place called the Centre for Addictions and Mental Health here in Toronto. He was there for the past 5 years. He was deemed by an organization called the Ontario Review Board. They're supposed to evaluate you and see if you still fit within the not criminally responsible system. He was deemed to be a significant threat to reoffend in May. And for some reason, the people at the CAMH decided to let him out at the hospital. They gave him a day pass. He somehow got a passport, somehow got the money for a plane ticket to China, and fled that day. So there's questions about who helped him get his passport, who helped pay for his ticket, who helped him get to the airport. The guy speaks very little English, has very few connections in the community. There's questions about why the police waited 11 days to say anything. And so there are an awful lot of questions surrounding this case. And then this week, another not criminally responsible, dangerous offender who was in for doing armed robberies escaped. Thankfully, police picked him up the same day. But we're finding out that this place may not be the location to put these dangerous offenders who are found not criminally responsible due to mental illness. According to several reports, they are escaping on a regular basis.
Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig have been detained in China for more than 200 days. Many believe it's in retaliation to Canada detaining Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive. Now, Huawei Canada has announced a partnership to build 4G wireless in our country's north.
Yeah, linking dozens of communities in the north that simply don't have great wireless or internet access. And they're saying, okay, we're going to partner with communities. We're going to go in there and invest. And normally you'd say this is a great thing. But there is a lot of concern about giving Huawei too much access to the infrastructure for our wireless communications, allowing them into Canada's networks because of claims that this company, this organization, is far too close to the regime in Beijing. There's debate among our Five Eyes partners, that would be Canada, the United States, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, about do we let these guys in? Because we share a lot of intelligence and we share them over the communications networks that we'd be allowing Huawei to be part of. And this could leave not only Canada vulnerable, but then our allies vulnerable, but specifically with this attempt to go into places like Nunavut, Nakalawit, this is going to leave the north vulnerable. I'm not sure that this is a good idea. I've been long a proponent of keeping Huawei out. This is an issue that goes back to the Harper years for sure. I can't remember how far back out, but I do remember covering it. And various governments have had different, the two different governments have had different views on it. But I think right now there's definitely a standoffish position from the Trudeau Liberals. I'd rather they keep that. I'd rather this deal didn't go through.
Yeah, many people are concerned about security issues, definitely. Now, I have some questions for you about 24 Sussex. No one has lived there since the last election, but it's still costing taxpayers plenty of money, and now the federal Conservatives are raising concerns.
Yeah, they're saying that, look, Justin Trudeau should have moved on this. Now, is it fair to blame this on Justin Trudeau? 24 Sussex Drive, like all the official residences, and we're talking about Rideau Hall, where the Governor General lives, we're talking about Stornoway, where the official opposition leader lives, the Citadel in Quebec City, and Harrington Lake, the Prime Minister's summer home. Those are all maintained by an organization called the National Capital Commission, that if you've never lived in Ottawa, you've never experienced how frustrating and bureaucratic an organization this can be. They're in charge of doing this, but the Prime Minister can have a bit of say. Stephen Harper famously said he would not move out to allow renovations to take place. Back then, Sheila Fraser, the Auditor General, said it would cost about $10 million to fix up 24 Sussex. Now we're talking about a price tag for all of the official residences that I just listed off of about $100 million. And some of them are taking place right now at Rideau Hall. That's why the Governor General is not living there. But others have not taken place. And these are beautiful homes, but they're in awful condition. The Prime Minister moved into a different home so that renovations could move forward. Nothing's happened. He could at least be applying pressure to say, you've got to get something done. That doesn't appear to have happened. And unfortunately, we're still paying the bills because guess what? That's where they cook his meals every day. They're still cooked over at the kitchen at 24 Sussex Drive and driven across the street for him and his family or guests or whatever. We're still paying huge electricity bills for the place and keeping the lights on, essentially. So it's costing us a lot of money. It's not getting fixed. And the price tag to fix it just goes up and up.
Maybe the Prime Minister just needs to skip the dishes. You know, maybe I don't know. We'll see. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
The world was saddened to hear about the deadly terrorist bombings that took place this last Easter at a number of Catholic churches and hotels in Sri Lanka. What's behind the bombings? What does it mean for Christians living there? Gary Stagg is the Executive Director of Open Doors Canada, and he joins me now via Skype from Mississauga. Gary, the unusual part in this recent terrorism is that the tensions in Sri Lanka are normally ethnic. The problems usually arise between the government and the separatist group, the Tamil Tigers. Is it true that for many years, relations between Sri Lankan Christians and Muslims have been reasonably friendly?
Yes, and this is where the whole shock of Easter Sunday came to all of us. We were not anticipating this. I mean, we are holding our breath every Easter, wondering not if there's going to be a church bombing, but where the church bombing will be. That's just the reality of the day that we live in, because we've seen so many church bombings over the past number of years, and it just seems to be escalating. And of course, churches are usually targeted on their most holy days, and so Easter Sunday, being the most holy day of the year, we were expecting, a church bombing or church bombings, but it came out of left field for us, the fact that it was in Sri Lanka.
Gary, I was reading a report that said moderate Muslim leaders have actually warned the government 2 years ago about the leaders of those recent bombings. So should we believe that there's hope for peace?
I think that normally the situation between Muslims and Christians in Sri Lanka has always been a fairly peaceful one. The problem, of course, came where there was again, an extremist group, which was, we believe, something that was a part of ISIS that had kind of gone back to the country and caused that situation. But the problem was that, and you mentioned that there were warnings, and there were indeed warnings about this situation. Unfortunately, there is a lot of upheaval within the country itself, within the government, and so on. And so those warnings weren't heeded, unfortunately, and so it got us to Easter Sunday.
Sri Lanka, as many know, has a majority Buddhist population, but many are surprised by the association of violence with Buddhism. But it does exist in Sri Lanka. How long has Buddhist extremism been directed at Christians?
We see Buddhist extremism not only in Sri Lanka, but we see it in other countries as well. we do typically think of, but when we think of Buddhism, we think of Zen, we think of peace and harmony and all of those kinds of things. But again, extremism is the situation, and we have things like when there's religious nationalism that takes hold in a country, which we're seeing increasingly all over the world. For Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka, for instance, in India, we have the situation with Hindus, and same thing, religious nationalism, and then that fires up the extremists who think it's their right then that they can basically pick on the minority religions in the country.
Are Christians allowed to build churches and gather together freely to worship in Sri Lanka?
In Sri Lanka, they have the constitutional right to freedom of religion. There was a situation about a year ago where one group was denied something because of proselytizing. And so, but generally speaking, they do have a constitutional right for freedom of religion. But again, it's one thing to have freedom of religion, but the situation is the freedom to change one's religion. And so that's often in dispute. You have a freedom to believe what you want to believe and to worship how you want to worship, but you don't have the freedom to change that religion. And of course, many religions are proselytizing religions, and that's where the situation comes in, because they feel threatened that the church is growing and the church is proselytizing more of their people, and that tends to get a backlash.
So how does the mainstream media there portray Christianity? Do they view a lot of Christians as extremists?
No, they don't. They don't look on them too favorably because, again, Christianity is a very small part of the population of Sri Lanka. It's, I believe, 7% of the country is Christian, and out of that, only, I believe, 1.2% of that is evangelical Christians, or there's 300,000 evangelical Christians, and so they don't look too favorably on them because of what I just spoke about. They see them as proselytizing and impinging on the Buddhist religion.
Now, I understand that some young extremist leaders are also making use of social media to target Christians by spreading false stories about them, which can then lead to violence?
Yes, it's well, this is the world that we live in, right? We all live with the joys and the angst of social media, and unfortunately, it's used again to spread falsehoods. And in Sri Lanka, it's been used to spread falsehoods about Christians, and in particular evangelical Christians. But also, it's been used to target false stories of Muslims. And so, yeah, it's a real threat for sure. And of course, it just gains the lies are told, and then it just gains more fuel, and that's where we get sometimes the acts of violence against Christians. I spoke to you a while back about the World Watch List, Open Doors World Watch List. Sri Lanka is number 46. It's pretty low on the list, but yet we do know of a number of more than 60 cases last year of violence against Christians or attacks against Christians. And so a lot of those things are spurred on by lies and things that are put out on social media, which gives people the feeling that they have the right to retaliate.
How about financial persecution, Gary? Do Christians have trouble getting hired, or do some companies refuse to sell to Christians?
We know of a number of situations where Christians have been denied jobs. In Sri Lanka, there's been a number of teachers who have been denied positions to teach because of being Christians, and that's a general problem all over the world when it comes to Christian persecution. Christians are often try to keep Christians to the lowest rung of society, and so they will be denied jobs, they'll be denied finances, and their children will be denied education in the better schools. They will be kept in just really to try to keep them down. And so that is a real problem for them, for sure. And so that affects them financially all around.
Gary, why don't you share with our viewers for just a moment here, what happens in Sri Lanka when a Buddhist converts to either Christianity or Islam? How does that person's family and community respond?
Well, because of Buddhism being the major religion in the country, normally when a person converts to Christianity or Islam, they will be ostracized by their family, and not only by their family, but also they'll be ostracized by their whole community. And so they live in isolation, basically. It's often that way everywhere, isn't it? If somebody decides to leave a strict religious organization to go to another one, that organization will shun them or isolate them.
Let's also talk about the nearby nation, Myanmar. They too have a minority population of Muslims who have suffered terrible persecution from that government. When a Rohingya Muslim converts to Christianity, how are they treated?
Likewise, we say that Christians in Myanmar are the doubly persecuted, because just by the fact of their nationality, their ethnicity, they're persecuted, because generally they are Muslim. Rohingya are Muslim people, and so you've got that persecution in that country because the country is persecuting them. But then if you have believers that convert to Christianity from Islam within the Rohingya population, they suffer persecution from their own people. So it's like a double whammy. They're what we call the doubly persecuted. So they're persecuted by their nation, first of all, because that's their ethnicity, but also because of the fact that their own Islamic family will persecute them as well for making that decision.
Gary, what is Open Doors doing to bring peace to these areas and to support believers?
Well, in Sri Lanka in particular, I'll speak to that because we're talking about that today. We were there immediately after the bombings, standing with the Christians that went through that horrific bombings, I should say. And I know that a number of our staff were there to attend the funerals of those who had lost their lives, and just standing with them. We're a ministry of presence, and I've always kept that as a center focus, as a focus of our ministry, where we go and we stand with persecuted believers all around the world. We were there for that. We continue to offer them counseling, trauma counseling. We're also offering right now, there's an emphasis on persecution preparedness, because unfortunately, we can't think of this as an isolated event, but because of this event, it can spur on more trouble in the country. And so we're trying to really educate the people there. We're trying to disciple them so that they understand how to respond to persecution when it happens. We're helping 250 families that have been affected by the loss in the country. I think of one story of a little guy by the name of Jackson. He's a 13-year-old boy who was, the children were, when the bombing happened, the children were actually walking back to the main service for the breakfast time when the bomb was detonated. And little Jackson was walking with his aunt, who was also his Sunday school teacher, and they were both killed in the bombing. Also, Jackson's uncle, so the husband of the Sunday school teacher, also lost his life about a week later because of the injuries that were inflicted on him. And so now we talked to Jackson's father, and he's lost his sister, his brother-in-law, his son, so many other friends and church members that he's lost. But we've come alongside of people like that just to strengthen them and to help them know that they're not alone in this, that there are Christians all over the world who are praying for them, who are standing behind them, who are doing all that we can to help them through this situation. And it's wonderful to hear the testimony of this man who knows that he lost his son. He said, I had my son for 13 years, but now God has him for eternity. And so a great perspective, a great mature perspective on that. And we want to see more of that maturity in the body of Christ in Sri Lanka. And so we're trying to bolster their faith in whatever way we can.
Gary, that's a powerful story, definitely. What else outside of prayer can our viewers do to really help Open Doors bring assistance to Christians in Sri Lanka?
I always say, it's so easy for us in the West, in a place like Canada, where we can hardly imagine this kind of thing happening. But it doesn't mean that we can turn a blind eye to what's happening all around the world. And the truth is, it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. Persecution is on the rise. It's been steadily on the rise for the past number of years. This past year saw a huge spike in persecution around the world. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand what's happening. Prayer, of course, is the number one thing that they ask us for. But I always say we need to be aware, and we need to pray with the understanding that we know who these brothers and sisters are. And so, we provide a prayer calendar, a monthly prayer calendar for anybody that wants it. They can go on to our website, opendoorsca.org, and they can download a copy of that. They can sign up to have a copy delivered to their home. They can tuck it in their Bible, and every day there is there's a prayer request with an actual name attached to it. Sometimes the name is changed for security reasons, but you know that when you're reading that, you're reading an actual story of somebody from the persecuted church, and you can read that story and then just pray a brief prayer. That's how I got involved with the persecuted church 20-some years ago, is that I started with the prayer calendar. And so I would encourage people to download that prayer calendar. Get a copy in the mail if you prefer that. And also our newsletter, our magazine that goes out every other month, has stories about all of these things that are happening around the world. And I think it's really important to be engaged with this and to advocate on their part whenever we can.
Gary Stagg is the Executive Director of Open Doors Canada. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Mississauga.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.